To look at some of these shadows or some of the reactivity that we might see at this third person perspective taking ability that really comes through when we feel like we're not being the best. Because the shadows here are about overachieving and pushing ourselves too hard. And that normally comes from a deep assumption we've let ourselves down, we're not as good as we thought we are, and maybe that's the feedback we've got. That a lot of the time is the trigger. We've been criticized. We were not good enough. We didn't do the best we could do. And what happens then to you when you get that kind of feedback? That's probably the feedback that triggers these kind of shadows. It's the parts of us that want to prove ourselves, prove that person wrong. God damn it, I am better than that, and I'll prove it to you. That's on a third person perspective shadow right there. Not feeling like they did the best and wanting to prove that they can. Again, it's that younger part. It's an older younger part now. It's more conscious, it's more evolved. Because remember, these parts got split off in that sort of age group between 10, 11, 12, up to about 16. So it's definitely a more conscious part, but it's still a younger part than you are today. And that I've got to prove myself can really get us into trouble sometimes, can't it? We end up pushing our way through and damaging relationships, damaging our work, damaging our businesses, because we're trying to prove ourselves too much. And the only person we're trying to prove it to is ourselves. Because deep down underneath it all, for some reason, we feel like we're not good enough. And that's what these shadows are all about. So we can end up being overworked, we can be stressed, we can look for a lot of recognition and praise. Another sign one of these shadows has been triggered. Because we want to feel good enough. So what do you do when you want to feel good enough? You try and create as many situations as you can where you might get the feedback that you are good enough. That you are doing an excellent job. So you will look for that wherever you go. Sure, you might recognize that in yourself. You'll definitely recognize it in those around you. That's normally that younger, underdeveloped part wanting to feel like they're good enough, to feel like they've done a good job. This can also lead to, being very overly focused on money or status, and can be very cold and distant because it's all about you again. It's a very kind of selfish level of development as we go into this third person. And we can, because we're more sort of psychologically developed here, we can be quite manipulative in this. Remember the age group that these shadows get split off at? We're more evolved now. So we can play the game a little bit better. These shadows are actually more evolved shadows now. They have more consciousness in them, even though they're unconscious to you. So again, working with them, we've got to be honest first. We've got to go looking. Where do I show up like this? What kind of situations trigger this for me? And what is actually going on? What's that underlying assumption I might have made about myself that is causing me to prove myself, to overwork, to overachieve? Continually. It's like a hungry ghost. That's again a sign of a shadow. We're never getting there. We're always trying to get there. So once we start to integrate these parts, we own up to it, we actually start to challenge the assumption and the belief sitting underneath these shadows and reactivity, then we can actually start to do something about it. And once you actually start to integrate these third person shadows, we actually feel like we've got more passion and drive to improve things in life. We don't have to have that proving ourselves in unconscious ways. We can improve things because it's conscious now. We can evolve ourselves. We realize we are developmental beings that are in a sequence of evolution, and we can get better and better and better at that. We can really own our entrepreneurialism, our innovation, our drive to actually continually make things better. What a beautiful thing to bring online and not having the shadow, which is normally a very selfish way of holding it. And we feel good enough about ourselves. That's the number one. We stop trying to prove ourselves to others. We don't need that feedback anymore. We know we're good enough because you've integrated that part. You don't need to keep searching for it outside of yourself.